Hey everybody, Dr. G here. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and body language expert, and today we're going to be analyzing more behavior and body language from Ruby Franke. Ruby Franke recently pled guilty to numerous counts of felony child abuse. We don't know yet how Jodi Hildebrandt, her co-defendant, is going to be pleading for her case. What we're going to be looking at today is Ruby Franke's behavior and body language during her hearing where she enters her guilty plea. Before we get started, I do want to remind you of a couple of things. One, this is not a psychological evaluation of any kind. These are just my opinions. In addition to that, I do want to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, let's go.
Ms. Franke is now here. Mr. Winward, we are scheduled for a waiver hearing. Is there going to be a waiver today?
There will, plus a plea agreement, Your Honor.
All right.
I'll ask the bailiff to hand you if it's been executed.
All right. Mr. Winward, you have discussed with Ms. Franke a preliminary...
So you may already notice that she looks very different in this hearing than she did in the initial hearing after her arrest. If you saw that, she looked quite angry during that hearing. Now, we only saw a little clip of that, but then the clip that we saw, her appearance was very different than it is right now.
Discussed with Ms. Franke a preliminary hearing, what's involved in a preliminary hearing. She understands she has a right to a preliminary hearing on all of the charges in the case. She understands what the charges are, and she's prepared to waive a preliminary hearing in the case on all charges.
She is, and that is contained in this agreement on page 7 as well.
Very good. All right, I've been handed a plea.
So you'll notice right now her body posture is straight up. She's looking straight ahead. She obviously is very aware of everything going on around her. Sometimes when people have lost confidence or when they're doing something they absolutely don't want to do, their head is down, their body is slumped. Hers does not appear that way right now.
Agreement, and it appears to be signed by Ms. Franke. Ms. Franke, did you sign this agreement?
Yes.
And you did that today? When did you sign it?
On the 18th.
Okay. You've read it carefully?
Every word.
Your signature represents to the court that you've read it carefully, that you understand what you've read, and that you agree to all of the terms. Is that all accurate?
So as the reality of this is setting in, as the judge is reading this, you can see some tension in her face. And as anybody would be tense during this, but watch her mouth right here.
And it appears to be signed by Ms. Franke. Ms. Franke, did you sign this agreement?
Yes.
And you did?
You see her pursing her lips a little bit. We tend to do this when we're starting to feel stress. Once again, that's very understandable in a situation like this.
Did that today? When did you sign it?
On the 18th.
Okay. You've read it carefully?
Every word.
Another thing you're seeing her do quite a lot is close her eyes as she responds to the judge, which is understandable. Once again, this is very stressful. People do that oftentimes in order to shield the thoughts they're having or to not necessarily look at the person that they're responding to, even if it's just for a brief moment, because of the amount of stress it's causing them.
Your signature represents to the court that you've read it carefully, that you understand what you've read, and that you agree to all.
Right there, for example.
Represents to the court that you've read it carefully, that you understand what you've read.
It's a little bit slower than a blink, but it's not just sitting and closing her eyes.
And that you agree to all of the terms. Is that all accurate?
Yes.
You've had sufficient time to ask questions of your counsel, to go over any questions you have. You're ready to go forward.
Yes.
You don't need any more time.
I'm ready.
Her body language does continue to be consistent with someone who's confident about a decision they're making. She is sitting upright. She is looking straight ahead. She does obviously seem to know what's going on around her. She's responding to questions appropriately. And I only point that out because there had been suggestions before that she might go for a defense that she doesn't get what's going on, or that maybe that there's some sort of insanity defense or something like that. Clearly, as she enters this guilty plea, she does know very much what's going on.
Ms. Franke, is anyone pressuring you to enter into this agreement?
No.
Anyone promising you anything I haven't been told about?
No.
Anything that's not in the written plea agreement?
No.
Are you under the influence of alcohol or drugs today?
No.
Is there anything today that could in any way interfere with your ability to understand the agreement, its consequences, anything?
No.
No physical condition, no medication, nothing?
No, Your Honor.
One thing that we're not seeing at all right now, we're not seeing angry eyebrows, we're not seeing scowls, we're not seeing different facial expressions that we oftentimes see with people in situations like this. So I think that's interesting.
Mr. Winward, we ready to proceed?
We are ready to proceed.
All right, then. Ms. Franke, how do you plead to count 1, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
Guilty.
To count 3, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
Guilty.
To count 5, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
So a lot of what we're seeing from her is that are those eye closes, that intense stress she's feeling as she's pleading guilty to these crimes, because there's really no going back at this point. Of course, there really wasn't any going back before they got to court today because she had already signed all of the documents and all of that. But what we're not seeing is exaggerated body language. She's not doing anything that's really big or anything that seems performative in that sense, which historically she really has. She is somebody that has really strong reactions. It tends to be very animated. We're not seeing any of that today.
Guilty.
And to count 6, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
With my deepest regret and sorrow for my family and my children, guilty.
There is a factual basis set forth in the agreement.
So you'll see after she said that, she did look down. Watch this right here.
Guilty.
When we look down, that's oftentimes a loss of confidence. It's a feeling of shame, potentially. So it does seem in a real way that there is a sense of shame as she pleads guilty to this.
There is a factual basis set forth in the agreement that is a stipulated factual basis, counsel.
I've heard the court say this several times in a different fashion. We are not binding the court to any specific sentence, and the court retains its right to sentence as it sees fit. I just mentioned that this is not a Rule 11 plea.
So as they're talking about the sentence, you can see that's something that Ruby Franke is feeling. Watch her face as he's talking about the sentence.
And the court retains its right to sentence as it sees fit.
Deep breaths, closing her eyes, looking up. All of this clearly are the points that are causing her the most stress.
I just mentioned that this is not a Rule 11 plea, but although it's a stipulated statement of defendant.
Counsel, approach, please.
So that's pretty much all we get of Ruby Franke today from this hearing. But we did get to see some of how different she is now and how differently she presents now than she has in pretty much any situation up to this point. One thing that I have to at least acknowledge is that since she pled guilty, now her family doesn't have to get re-traumatized by going on the stand, providing testimony about everything that's happened, and relive all of this. So hopefully by her entering this guilty plea, it's going to help the family start to heal more than they already have. Obviously, her pleading guilty doesn't undo any of the things that she did, and I'll be very curious how the court ultimately deems fit to see her sentenced on February 20th. What we don't know at this point is how Jodi Hildebrandt is going to ultimately plea, because if she pleads guilty, obviously, then the family truly can start to heal. And if she decides to fight it, then it's always possible that they will end up being on the stand, that there will be all of that re-exposure to all of these things that they've been through. Hopefully, we'll see resolution to this soon. If there's anybody else that you want to see me do a video on, please let me know in the comments below. And if you have any thoughts about this case yourself, I would also love to hear them in the comments. Last thing before we get finished up is I do want to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, thanks for watching.